are to get all the Michigan Democrats voting. As you know, Michigan is a winner-takes-all state. Apparently, there's only 2 states that aren't, but the point is that it doesn't matter where that Democratic vote comes from in Michigan. It's very important that all the Democrats vote. And so a vote in Ann Arbor is just as important as a vote anywhere else. Trump won by only 11,000 votes, and that's approximately the number of Democrats in my ward. It's very important to get everyone voting and get them voting early. If you've been listening to the news, you know that there's going to be a contested election, especially for any ballots that are coming in after November 3rd. So even though Michigan has changed the law that says that we can postmark our ballots as late as November 2nd or 3rd, I've heard both, we shouldn't. We've got to encourage people to get those ballots handed in by November 3rd instead of just postmarks. So that's why it's so important we get the information about the drop boxes and all that out. And we need to make sure that everyone's vote counts. Again, 10,000 mail-in ballots were rejected in the August 4th primary. And if Trump won by only 11,000 votes in Michigan, I mean, this is super important. And last time it was mostly due to signature problems or late arrivals. So we really have to work on that. So just a quick note that we're not trying to convince people how to vote. If they want advice on, you know, all the different races, for instance, Washtenaw County Dems has a voter guide, and this chat has, this PowerPoint has links. All these things are linked so that if we send you the PowerPoint, you will then be able to access all these links. Okay, we used a whole lot of different resources. We've been studying and studying. I feel like I'm back in grad school, but I would say the Bible of this stuff is michigan.gov/vote. It's an incredible resource. You can get everything you want there. The Ann Arbor City Clerk has a very good web page, actually several pages on this. I had good luck talking to the people in Lansing, the Michigan Bureau of Elections, Michigan Election Reform Alliance. They're a wealth of information. On down the line, there's all kinds of great resources out there. We have our target populations are the absentee voters, because 30% of them haven't turned in their ballots for the primaries. And this year, far more absentee voters will be Democrats, as we all keep hearing about. And we all keep hearing that those under 30 are the biggest population category in terms of low voter turnout. And they also tend to vote Democratic. And there's a lot of things they don't know, such as that out-of-state students can vote in Michigan if they've been here for 30 days by November 3rd. These are important things to get out. And Detroit is being targeted as a very important place to increase turnout, because their turnout has been not always, but has been historically low, and they have a lot of voters, and the majority of them are Democrats. Their strategies, our strategies, are 4 different ones. And I don't know, these are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Some people, when they get my PowerPoint, they say it's numbered wrong, but you're sharing my screen, so I think you can see. Number 1, we are trying to contact absentee voters that haven't yet sent in their ballots. And I'll explain to you how we know who those people are. And we're doing campus outreach to reach those young people. We're trying to dispel misinformation and provide clarity, because a lot of this is very confusing, and it alienates, scares off a lot of would-be voters. And we're also going to go over how you can be a poll worker or an election challenger, which is shaping up to be one of the most crucial things you can do. Okay, for our first goal, we want to contact those absentee voters who haven't yet sent in their ballots. And there's a couple different ways of doing that. One is working with the Michigan Election Reform Alliance, and they're doing a campaign where they're going to be sending postcards to Detroiters that they get a public list of who those people are that have applied for ballots and haven't yet sent them in. And they are going to give us content for postcards, which we will then print up, and there'll be space for your handwritten comment. But the content will be things like, here's where you can drop off your ballot, here's the, you know, the deadlines, here's this and that. And it's very important that these people get these postcards, and we're going to send them out mid-October, and I'm the person that's coordinating it for our area. So anybody that's on this call, if you're interested in doing that, it's a very important and helpful thing to do. And you can take as few or as many postcards as you want. Another group that's doing something similar is here in Ann Arbor. They call themselves Neighbors for Democracy, and they are, again, using that public list to find out who applied for an absentee ballot but hasn't yet sent it in. And they can tell, again, who didn't last time in the primaries. So we're targeting those people especially, and people are going, knocking on doors of their neighbors or sending them letters in the mail, or however they want to do it. And again, if you're interested in that, let me know. And they have a whole handout. I'm not expecting you to read this, but when you get the PowerPoint to this, you can look at it. But they give you, you know, guidelines, and we'll give you assignment, or actually you can pick the people on the Google Doc that you want to sign up to be responsible to remind them about the absentee ballots. Another way is to contact people through wavemichigan.com. And those are trying to find those well-intentioned but previously, quote, weak Democratic absentee voters. And because we have Jonathan Levine on the call, I'm going to hand it over to him, because when I was looking on wavemichigan.com yesterday, I found that Jonathan Levine is the number 2. They keep track of who's doing the most on this website, and Jonathan has been doing, what, thousands, Jonathan? Something like that? So, okay, just a second. I'm trying to unmute you. It's not unmuting you. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes. I'm not sure how many, but yes, it's not. I wouldn't say thousands, but probably over 1,000 anyway.
Okay.
Maybe 2,000.
All right. So can you share your screen, Jonathan?
Sure can.
Okay.
Share screen, and we're gonna go to elections 2020 and share. And you guys seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So Wave is a database with this interface that allows you to search for people. And there's a lot of different ways of searching, but the important thing is that you can find exactly the information that Barb was talking about. So what I've done here is I've just searched so far. This one, let's see, let's search for everybody in my precinct. That's Ward 1, Precinct 10. And I'm going to search for them. And they'll come up with a lot of different icons, and the icons tell you what you need to know. As an example, let's see. Here's a really key one. If you see it, the PRI and the red line here, I'm going to click that icon, and you're going to see that that person received an August primary absentee ballot but didn't return it. Okay, so that is like #1 target of opportunity. Obviously, it's not the August one we care about now, and I assume that very shortly Wave will switch over to the November ballot. I think it's a little premature to say we haven't returned our ballots yet, because if we got them, we probably only got them yesterday, I think. But I'm pretty sure that Wave will quickly do that. And there's a number, you can see here, there's a number of searches. For example, Democratic voter, you can search for specifically for the Democratic voters that didn't return their primary ballot, and that would obviously filter for that group. So this is all of that group, the problematic group. One of the outcomes is, which I haven't actually seen, is August primary absentee ballot was rejected. So ultimately we'll be able to search on that and see people who had a rejected ballot. And I think the concept that Barbara is going to be talking about is how to reach out to people who've had a rejected ballot to get them to correct their error. The thing about Wave is it's only got limited amount of contact information. So it would be wonderful if there were a full set of emails in Wave, a full set of cell phone numbers, et cetera, et cetera. There are no emails, and there's a spotty set of cell phone numbers. So Wave is best paired with some other set of information. What Wave likes people to do is, to start with, they like people to reach out to their own networks broadly cast. And you might say, well, all of my friends vote every time, but I suspect if you look at their 20-something kids, you might find that they don't. So you can reach out to your network and find people who aren't regular voters and aren't on the absentee list. I've been doing another thing, which is a campus outreach. Is now the time to talk about that one, Barbara?
Yeah, well, you can go ahead. Yeah.
So the good thing about the University of Michigan when you're trying to outreach to people is that it's got its public databases. You can search the University of Michigan directory. So I've put together a sheet of the various graduate programs together with their graduate links to their graduate student page and to their staff page. And I've been recruiting people to check those people, see whether they are on the absentee list, and send them information. And in the case of the students, particularly about the remote clerk's office. So the Ann Arbor clerk has a remote office on campus. It's in the Art Museum. And it's very, very popular. The students say it's far and away the best way to vote. So anything we can do to get that information into the hands of the campus community would be great. So that's the campus outreach part of this. But basically, people can pair this with any data set they have, any way of contacting people.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan.
My pleasure.
As you can see, the people's postal address is right on there. So you can definitely, send them a letter or a postcard. So do you want to end your screen sharing, Jonathan?
Yes.
Okay. And one note is that, in a sense, it doesn't really matter when they update the information on this, because what they were showing us, what they did last time in the primaries may be indicative of what they'll do this time. So that's another reason we're just saying, well, if they didn't get it in last time because their signature was wrong or because whatever, it could happen again. So let's see, I need to go back to sharing my screen and let's see. All right, so for instance, just to show you, hey, just a second, this is blocking it a little bit. So here's my name and my husband's name, and it shows that we're blue, means we vote Democratic. We've voted 100% of the time. This means we've received our absentee ballots. This means that during the primary, we did get ours in. So it's a good resource. For some reason, okay. So we already went through all that. All right, so campus outreach is the second goal. And the first bullet point was what Jonathan already talked about. Now the second bullet point is actually visiting campus. So again, what we're talking about today is kind of a menu of opportunities. And whatever floats your boat. You know, if you're interested in going to campus, great. If you're not, great. But if you are, we can help you do that. You know, we're suggesting that you have some kind of indication as to why you're there, you know, like a sign that says, you know, you can register and vote on campus now through November 3rd. Ask me how. We have this flow chart that we put together that we're going to talk about in a minute. We suggest you take a voter registration form. And I don't know if you guys have studied one of these forms recently, but they are extremely informative. They're kind of complex, and I found I had to read it over a bunch of times, but once I felt familiar with it, I feel good about being able to help someone else with it. I guess what I'm saying is the directions on there are well worth studying. We're going to supply you with a map to the clerk's offices and the drop boxes. A sample ballot would be helpful. I got my ballot today, and I'm thinking it might be confusing, this part about the partisan section and how you can split your ticket and things like that. So that would be helpful, because if we point people into the clerk's office and say, you can walk right in there and vote, which is, you know, really important to let them know now that Michigan has changed the law that absentee voters, anybody can vote absentee and anybody can walk into a clerk's office, get their, apply for the ballot, get their ballot right then and there, fill it out right then and there, hand it in right then and there. It all can be done at once. But if you haven't looked at a ballot ahead of time, it can be a little confusing. So we might want to, you know, encourage people to do that. And I mean, they can get it online as well, but having the physical thing there, if we're going on campus, would be helpful. So Jim McCauley is coordinating this. And Jim, are you here?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm very happy to help out with this. Obviously, we will be masked up when we do this. I think we want to do it at least in pairs when we go on campus. There's a little bit of pre-work, but I think the goal is really, with students, we take the risk of not knowing if they're going to vote Democratic or Republican, but being that a large percentage of students are Democrat, I think just getting them out to vote is a good opportunity here as well. And the fact that it's so convenient and so close, I think we want to make sure that we take every opportunity to get the student population voting. So please contact me. I'll help people pair up. I'll help get the materials together for you. And I plan to do some of this myself. So depending on the timing, we might be able to go up there together, and really look forward to working with anyone who wants to try this.
Great. Thank you very much, Jim. All right, and now we're ready for this fabulous, I just love this flow chart that Damon put together. Damon, are you there? Oh,
yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. And I need to stop. I think I need to stop my screen sharing so you can start yours.
Okay.
So,
can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, this is the same flow chart that Barbara was just showing. Basic idea. I mean, voting is easy, right? If you've done it before, especially if you've done it before here. But if you haven't, especially for the students, you may not know when you can go to vote, where you can go to vote, or what documentation you need to bring. And there's a lot of informational resources that tell you all that information, but they tend to be presented as a wall of text, which is sometimes confusing or off-putting, or you just kind of get lost in the weeds at times. So this is just meant to kind of simplify that process, because it really isn't that complicated usually. So I'm not going to go through box by box. I think the flow chart itself is fairly easy. Just start at the top, decide, where are you eligible to vote? These are your options to vote, to register, and then to vote. It's arranged in a way to kind of guide people towards the yellow boxes in the middle here. Either register and vote at the clerk's office, or if they're already registered, go to the clerk to vote. just because that's going to be the most reliable way to make sure that your vote is counted this year. So the flow chart itself, I'm not going to belabor it. It should be fairly straightforward how it goes. There's a few yellow information boxes around the side that I do want to point out a little bit, because these are kind of, I think, points to start a conversation. So for example, there's a link to the Secretary of State and the kind of website and the types of things you can do there, which is really, really great. I don't know if they have updated it this year or not, but I'm really impressed by how easy and how much information is available at this one link at the Secretary of State website. You can see, look up yourself if you're already in the system and see where you need to go to vote. If you are registered, if they've sent you a ballot, if your ballot has been accepted, all this information is this one location. You can look up your sample ballot. There's some kind of warnings here about what you can do to make sure that your ballot was accepted, mainly the things that Barbara already touched on, that your signature must match. And there's I'm gonna add here, Molly had sent out, I saw on Nextdoor, there's another thing here that we need to mention, is that if you're voting absentee or dropping off your ballot, you need to use both envelopes, which is another thing we should add here. And then another, here, a plea to, if they're interested, please volunteer to be a poll worker. You can be a poll worker anywhere in Michigan, and there are certain districts that need it more than others. Everything is a QR code here, which makes it easy as a handout, but these will also be clickable, so you can share this document electronically as well. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
And stop share.
Okay. Yeah. Excuse me. Even though we did it kind of for students, because their situations can be pretty complex in terms of, coming from out of state and everything, the chart works perfectly fine for anybody. And I think we didn't even include some things on there, like what should happen if COVID hits and they've registered here and they've got a ballot coming to them and they go up, have to run home to out of state, what should they do? We've researched all that stuff. So if you have any questions like that, it doesn't matter how hard your question is, let us know, because chances are we've already researched it, or we can send you to, who would be the right answer for that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to PowerPoint and share that. Okay. For some reason, okay. All right, goal number 3, providing helpful information, clarity. Again, it seems like all this stuff is unnecessarily complex, and sometimes I wonder if that's not a little bit on purpose, so that it's harder to vote. So we have tried to sort out the information that we thought was most essential, most helpful, and we put together a tips list. And I'm just going to mention a few of the highlights. For instance, I always thought that you couldn't register past October 19th. And then I found out that that's only for online registration, that you can indeed register at your clerk's office past October 19th. And that's very important information that we need to get out. It's very important that people know that they can vote up to 4 p.m. on November 2nd without having to go to the polls, especially because of COVID. We need to get the word out about that. They just go to their clerk's office. And if they haven't registered, they can even vote up till 8 o'clock on the 3rd. So that's super important to know. And I always thought you couldn't vote unless you had a picture ID. Well, that's not true. You sign an affidavit and you can still vote. This business of the signatures on the ballots having to match the signature on file is huge. Apparently, my son had his signature rejected because it didn't match. So check your license and match it to that. Let's see, and you can check to make sure your ballot was accepted, because that's going to be super important. I would suggest everyone track their ballot. So Molly has been helping a lot with this, and she's going to be talking more about this tips list. Oh, I got to stop sharing. Molly?
She's muted.
Okay.
So I was just figuring out sharing my screen. Does everybody see the voting tips list here?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, Barbara has done all of this research. It's fantastic, because there are all of these little quirks that come up in conversation with our friends and family, or through the other work we're doing, or just that we don't understand. So I would really, we're going to be sending this to you, and I would really encourage everybody to read through it, and think about if this is one of the little tasks that appeal to you, as you know, one of the several efficient, like impactful things that Barbara's suggesting. What you can do after you've read it through is decide how to disseminate it out to your networks. Maybe it's emailing the whole document to friends. Maybe it's, you know, sending out one or two of your favorite tips on your in your social networks on Facebook. Or we're doing a tip every few days on Nextdoor. You can always, you know, like those and comment on those too. But just getting this information out once you've digested it is going to be very helpful, because misinformation is more of a barrier this time around than ever before, because we're hopefully getting a lot of people who haven't voted before, and the whole process can be a mystery. We're definitely getting a lot of people who haven't voted absentee before, and a lot of these tips are about absentee voting and doing that correctly. And then, of course, misinformation is everywhere because of COVID and Trump and the reliability of the Postal Service and all of that. So really getting this information out there can help prevent mistakes, and a steady stream of these pro-voting reminders will, you know, get people to, it'll bubble to their surface and like, oh yeah, after the 40th time I've heard this, I am reminded that I will go and vote, and now I know how. So
Great.
there are 26 of these. I'll just scroll down. I think, Barbara, you mentioned a lot of the really most interesting ones, but you'll see here that she has listed the ones in yellow that are time sensitive. So if you're sending them out to your networks, you might try to coordinate those if you feel like it. And then the red are Ann Arbor specific. Yeah. Barbara, anything else on that?
Oh, maybe you could scroll down and show them that we have images that you can attach, a whole bunch of different images. Like, for instance, for nextdoor.com, we found that if you have an image next to your comment, it tends to draw more attention. So we've collected a whole bunch of different images you can choose from.
Yeah, so you could just download this onto your computer. I would think you can right click. If you have any trouble using these, just let us know by email. But yeah, you can attach them to your post if you feel like going the extra mile there. So great.
Great. Thank you, Molly.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna back to my PowerPoint. All right. For some reason, this won't let me do this. Okay. So our last goal is facilitating a fair and efficient election by working on election day. Now, it's taken me a really long time to sort this out. There's a whole bunch of different jobs, and I'll try to, if you're like me, it seems really complex, but there's two major divisions. One are paid positions, and the other are volunteer positions. And the paid positions are a poll worker or an absentee ballot counter. The poll worker is right at the polls with the public. The absentee ballot counter is in another facility. It's less risky COVID-wise. So it might be something you'd want to consider. They are long hours for either of them. They're a long day. Now, the election protector volunteer positions are organized by the parties or by nonprofits. And those are divided into either poll observers or absentee ballot counting board observers. Okay, so the poll observers are there at the polls, and you can either be a poll challenger or a poll watcher. Now, the poll challenger has more responsibility. They are there if there's a problem with someone being turned away from the polls. And if the challenger feels it's unfairly being turned away, then they step in and try to resolve it. And there's legally a challenger from each party is allowed there. So it's important to have Democratic challengers at each of the polls. Now, the poll watchers have less of a role. They are kind of watching what's going on, and if there's some kind of problem, they are using their phone to contact whomever and let them know so that they can help with the troubleshooting. Now, the absentee ballot counting board observers are again in a different facility, so maybe there's less COVID risk. There's not so much of the public coming in and out. And they are also called challengers. There's a lot of different names being thrown around for these things. In Washtenaw County, they are trying to recruit lawyers and law students to be challengers. But in Detroit, interestingly, they are taking anyone to be a challenger. They need challengers very badly in Detroit. So I'm actually going to sign up to be a challenger in Detroit, because you don't have to be a lawyer, which I'm not. So here's how to sign up. And we're really emphasizing this because as the days go by, we're realizing that this election is going to be challenged, and we really need to work hard at doing everything we can to prevent the chaos. So we've got links here for you to sign up to count absentee ballots or work at the polls. Again, you're going to be getting this PowerPoint, so you can click on these things and get what you need. You can tell them you want to work in a certain town, or you can say, send me where needed most. I noticed today that Ypsilanti Township is still in dire need, and they've got a email address for you to contact. And in terms of the election protection volunteer positions that I mentioned in the last slide, there's two groups doing this that I know of. The Michigan Dems, they have a program. They give you a 90-minute online training, and they also are encouraging you to recruit others. So if you don't feel you want to do it, they will give you a list of potential volunteers, a lot of them being lawyers and law students, and you can call them. And again, this Michigan Election Reform Alliance are the ones that are recruiting for Detroit, and they have a 2-hour online training. They'll take any help, any donations of money, driving students down there, anything you can do. And there's the sign up there for that. Let's see the next slide. Okay. And here's the Michigan Dems handout related to that. So in conclusion, we will send you the handouts that we've mentioned in this PowerPoint, along with the PowerPoint itself. And we're wondering if there's people on this call that think that they might like to have, for instance, we were thinking the UU churches, they might like to schedule similar Zoom calls. Or perhaps some of you might like to have a follow-up meeting because we're throwing out a lot of information and there's not a whole lot of time for discussion. You know, maybe we could meet again and talk about stuff like this. So those are the kind of things that, you know, if you want to put in the chat, that would be great. All right, so I will stop screen sharing. And the first thing I'd like to do is ask the people that were part of this, you know, VoteNowA2, if I've missed anything, and if you would like to, you know, unmute yourself and contribute whatever you would like to add. So Jim or Molly or anybody? Yeah.
I'll add one thing that just came to mind about the poll watcher and challenger roles. I had heard from someone who was counting absentee ballots last year that there were some people standing like this as around the sides as poll watchers or challengers, I'm not sure which, but kind of just being large and maybe not intimidating, but a little intimidating, I think. So I feel like the more representation the Democratic side has, the less opportunity there is for intimidation by the other side.
Yes, good point.
I can validate that. I've heard actually that Republicans are recruiting people that might be uniformed or take that types of intimidation to an extreme. And so it's really important to have somebody who is there to counter that. So if somebody is turned around or feels intimidated, that someone can approach them and guide them if need be. And that's obviously the kind of training that we would get. So yes, that definitely seems to be a risk.
Wow.
I might chime in here too as a bit player in this. First of all, I want to thank Barbara for all that she's done. I mean, it's amazing. She did really a great job. And I think the documentation and the way this meeting came off is just really validation of all that she's done. And also Jonathan and Damon and Jim and Molly, great job as well. One of the things that Barbara and I talked about, I sort of went into a panic at the end of last week after reading and hearing multiple interviews with the author of the article that was published in the Atlantic magazine. And if you're interested, you can read it, and it really describes some of the worst case scenarios and what happens or could happen between Election Day and Inauguration Day. But one of the things that I've realized since in listening to a lot of podcasts and doing some reading is that it's really important for us to consider what's in our, let's call it, sphere of interest, and that's certainly in our interest, but really act on what's in our sphere of influence and our control. And that's really what Barbara and her team put together tonight, is a roadmap to act in our sphere of control and in our sphere of influence. And for right now, to block out and just not pay attention to things that we're interested in, but frankly, we can't do anything about. There's other people that can do that. There's lawyers that the parties have engaged. I mean, they have funds set aside for this kind of stuff, and we shouldn't worry about that. We should worry about what we can do. And I think the documentation here is great. And one of the things, maybe just to add to that, is I've thought in recent days about the number of hours that I'm spending reading articles, listening to podcasts, doing this and that, and I know what I'm going to do. And I don't need to spend more time on all that. What I really need to spend the time on is making sure that I get out, that I work as a poll worker or as a challenger, that I get other people to register and to vote. And I hope all of you would do the same thing. Don't freak out. Think about where you can apply your time to really make a difference. And I'm sure that if you do that and you leverage your networks, or we all leverage our networks, that we can make a big difference. And the good thing is that there are people like us doing this around the country. And so let's, as I see Jane Fogel just joined, as she always says, game on, let's just do it. And that's what I'd be my closing remarks, at least from me.
Great, thank you.
Since John said my name, I want to say something really quick, and that is, I talked to a colleague in Washington, D.C., and Barbara, it's so great to hear you talking about WAVE, and Jonathan, all your work on it. He really emphasized that platform as a very impactful way to get engaged. It's about, it's a relational, the phrase he used was relational organizing, where you're leveraging your own network. And I think it's the safest, sit at your desk, roll up your sleeves, invest a couple hours, I think has a very high impact. The other thing that he said, and it was a real surprise, is the other two places where a lot of polling intimidation is anticipated is East Dearborn, because of the large Arab American community, and Southfield, because it is now a very large, primarily African American community. So as we think about potential destinations, I think those are two other areas that will be needing help.
It's good to know, thank you. Is there anybody on the call from the Washtenaw or Michigan Dems? I talked to a few people on the phone who said they might jump in for Q&A, but I don't think so.
I'm one of the area captains for Michigan Dems, so I guess I'm doing two hats here.
Okay, great. All right. So to go to the chat on the side, how do you find out if your vote counted in the primary? That's a really good question. I know easily how to find out if your vote has counted this time. Now, the WAVE, Michigan WAVE platform that we've been talking about, I would go there first, because that shows if your vote was received for the primary. And I would do that right away, because as Jonathan was mentioning, they're probably going to pretty soon be changing over. They're going to get rid of the primary information and start on this election. But that is a good question. So I might try to find out the answer to that tomorrow. But
I'd like to offer another answer.
Yeah.
It's the first cousin to WAVE. It's an affiliated product. It's called ballotpower.org.
Okay.
And I just verified my own vote, and I can see that my vote was received.
Good. Okay, great.
Ballotpower.org.
Okay,
Hey,
great.
Barbara, could you add that to the PowerPoint before you send it out again?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, I will.
Great.
And also we are going to be, in fact, you all can save the chat. No, maybe you can't. We're going to be saving the chat and sending it if there's questions in here we didn't get to. But the next question, how and when did Michigan change to a postmark rule for ballots? Last week I sent a link to the Michigan Vote site stating ballots must be received by the local clerk by November 3rd. I mean, it just happened that it can be postmarked. It just got changed.
Changed, but is it currently being challenged? I don't want to give the people that information because I don't know if it will be true on November 3rd.
Well, my feeling about it is that I don't even want to publicize that fact, because I agree that it's kind of risky, and I think people should just be getting their ballots in immediately and not be thinking, oh, I have till November 3rd because to postmark it. I think that's dangerous information to be sending around. So whether or not it's legal, I think we should be encouraging people to get their ballots handed in or received one way or another by November 3rd.
I got mine here.
Good. Yeah, I got mine. Mine's right here.
I'm voting for Donald. I'm voting for Donald.
I'm going to mute you. Okay, let's see. Yes, U of M is notifying students about the city clerk office at the Art Museum. Doesn't the city or township contact you if your signature doesn't match? And yes, they are supposed to contact you. And I feel pretty confident that they will in Ann Arbor, but I feel pretty confident that they won't in huge places like Detroit that are underfunded and don't have the staff. So that's why it's so important that we get that information out. Yeah, like, I don't know what the content is going to be for these postcards. They're
Pro Appreciation Month is here. We're so
oops. But I would think that would be an important one to put on there, is to say, make sure your signature matches that on your license.
Yes.
And somebody asked, what do they look for in matching your signature? And you have to look at your license. And for instance, if you put your initial, middle initial in, or, however you call yourself on your license, do it just like that. Now, if you don't have a license,
Exactly.
I'm curious, there's the state of Michigan identification card. So I would go by that if you don't have a license. And if you don't have either of those, I guess it would be your voter registration signature. But the important thing to know is that you can follow up and find out if your ballot was accepted. So that's a huge thing that we should be telling people, is to check after you've sent it in or dropped it off, follow up and make sure it was accepted, because you can't rely on the city clerk contacting you. And the other thing is, how hard do they have to try to contact you? Do they call you once and you don't answer the phone and they're off the hook? I just think it's really important that we follow up.
And I think if you find that it was rejected, you go and get a new one, and
Yep.
they let you do that. Is that right?
Yep. It's their legal responsibility to do everything they can to help you vote. So I feel pretty secure about the system, but only because I understand it. And it's taken me 3 weeks of steady study and phone calls to get this far. It's just a morass of information that nobody knows. Anyway, let's see. If folks have questions about being a poll worker or an election inspector, I did it in August and can probably answer some questions. So that's from Ginny Rogers. Does anybody have questions for Ginny? Barb Schultz does.
Training
So,
like.
Unmute yourself. Is Ginny still there? She may not be.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I wondered what the training was like.
It was online. This was for the city of Ann Arbor. So it was online for, I think, 2 hours. And really, they just kind of go through the procedures that you have to go through as an election inspector. And there's actually tons of resources. So they have a training manual that has it's really well done. It's got pictures of everything. It's very thorough. It explains everything so that if you, don't catch everything in the training, you've got this document.
And you felt well prepared by the time you were there?
Yeah, I did. Of course, I didn't remember everything, but there's somebody, the captain at the polling place is experienced and can answer the questions. Also, the clerk's office is available. So if there's an issue that comes up that, nobody's quite sure how to handle, you can easily call the clerk's office and ask your question.
I was wondering what is meant by a long day. If you volunteered, you have to volunteer for the entire duration of the day, or can you volunteer for a block of time?
For the city of Ann Arbor, you had to commit to the whole day to be an election inspector, which means you have to get there by 6 a.m. and stay until your precinct has finished all its tasks of, making sure that all the votes counts match and all that, which for us was like about an hour past the polls close. So 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. with 2 1-hour breaks.
I'd like to just point out that one reason I'm thinking of being a challenger at the Detroit absentee ballot board is because that is not the case. You can do a partial shift. And that's very important to me. I don't think I could handle that long day. So if anybody wants to do that with me, we'll be working in one large room at Cobo Hall or something like that. And I'm looking for people to drive down there with me. They said that they can take any number of people because they have 500 precincts that need poll challengers looking through all the absentee ballot counting. So please, anybody that's willing to drive down there with me, we would just work a partial day. Probably the later shift so that we'd be there till 8 p.m. and then go home then.
I've heard absentee ballot counting, you have to stay until it's done. So
yeah, but
I heard that could, go past midnight.
But not as a challenger. See, so that's what I would do as a challenger, because I don't want to be stuck there. Because who knows how long it would go till this time. So anybody that needs to go, but there's a few more questions. We'll just keep on, but I did tell you that if you want to go to the debate, don't feel rude about leaving. What can be done if your vote is not accepted? We already pretty much talked about that. Contact the clerk. Kunal asked if there are any local initiatives to help drive people to the clerk's office or to the polling booth. Does anybody know of any? I'm sure there are, because there usually are, but that's not something I've been looking into. Does anybody else know? I would contact the Washington County Dems or the Michigan Dems. Somebody must be organizing that. Usually they have way too many volunteers to do that. That's what I've always heard. So I don't know.
One of the things I'm hearing in a little outreach to students on campus is students will need rides. So we got to figure out how to kind of build up some student engagement, how to coordinate some rides for that.
Yeah, Jane, I was going to ask you about that because I would really like to get students down there being poll challengers in Detroit,
Right.
and I would
Right.
drive them.
Right.
So if you know students that would want to do that, as
I'm
long as
just
they
gonna-
wear masks in the car.
Yeah, right. I was just going to start reaching out through the climate action movement, and they're pretty tied in.
Yeah, that'd be great. I've been trying to actually reach Sunrise Elijah and haven't been able to get a hold of him. So if anybody has connections there, that would be great. Lisa,
Right, and I think the framing for that group and for any of the climate related groups is our very best strategy on climate change right now is a new administration in Washington. At the risk of stating the obvious, I think that's the kind of the segue.
Yep, well put. Lisa, you have a something you wanted to tell people, or no?
Well, it's related to the concern about what happens after election. That there's a man named George Lakey who is an author of a book called Viking Economics, and he's organizing with some others some trainings through a group called choosedemocracy.org. And I know yesterday or the day before there were about 500 people on.
Those are my go-tos.
Here's your new go-to.
There were about
Is what that is. I'm not where. Remember, there's only one job.
Somebody needs to be muted. Okay, go ahead.
So anyway, there's trainings for what to do after the election in the areas that you were mentioning earlier that people might not want to think about yet, but there are people who are planning, and I know there were 500 people on the on the training the day before yesterday. I signed up for one on October 6th, and I know there's one on October 2nd as well. So it's choosedemocracy.org. You can find it through, and I don't know, I could send something to Barb. I'll send you an actual link to the training description.
Okay, great. Tom Porter asks, which jobs are the safest from a COVID standpoint? I'm told that either counting absentee ballots or being absentee ballot watcher or challenger are the safest. I'm told that everybody will be wearing masks in that area, but masks are not required in the polls. They cannot legally require them.
Calling before the election from your house is also very COVID safe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a whole lot of things that we've talked about today that are very COVID safe. But in terms of the poll jobs. All right, well, somebody asked, where can people drop off their ballots? We've got tons of different places, and to find out, you can go to michigan.gov/vote, no matter where you live in Michigan, and find out where your drop boxes are. Or if you're in Ann Arbor, you go to the city clerk's office webpage, which is on this PowerPoint, the link to that is. So I'll be sending that to you all. And does anybody else have any parting words that they want to throw out? If not, thank you all so much for coming tonight. It's been awesome. I am going to remember to save the chat before I forget. And
Hey, Barb.
Yeah.
Can I mention something really quick? It was an unrelated meeting, but got talking with the township clerk out here in Scioto today. And there's another really interesting dynamic emerging, and that is a lot of people are making the choice to vote in person, even though they've already gotten their absentee ballot, because of the whole get it counted that day and try to get the convincing win. And so a lot of people are surrendering their ballot. And it opens up the risk of some number then having surrendered that ballot, but not then getting to the polling place on the 3rd. So I don't have a solution to that, but I just want to name it as an emerging dynamic.
Yeah, I think we need to tell people how safe it is to drop your ballot off, because you can check and make sure that it was received, and if it wasn't, you get to go to the clerk's office and fix it. And there's nothing hard about that. And it is hard to surrender your ballot. You've got to go to the polls, you've got to bring the ballot, you've got to get them to, delete it, it's going to hold up the line. It's a big mess. I don't know why anybody would choose to do that when they can verify. They can walk in person to the clerk's office during open office hours if they don't want to put it in a drop box. It's so safe. I think it's a shame that they're scaring people like that.
Yeah, it's not only is all of that true, but the motivation for it, at least in most cases, is false anyway, because all those votes are going to be counted and reported at the same time as the poll votes. They're not tallied after the polls are tallied.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Jane. Yep, okay, thank you, everyone. Enjoy the debate if you can stomach it. I'm too nervous to go watch it, personally. I'll read about it.
Thank you. Barb, thank you for all your work.
Sure.
This was amazing.
Oh, thank you for all the help. People keep mentioning me, but boy, it's been a group process, believe me. Thank you all so much.
Really well done, thanks.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thanks.